What's up, guys? Thanks for joining me. Can you please give the 101 symbolics? Keen to get one, be sick to hear how she rocks. I've done a few videos, quite a few streams and stuff using it as well. But check out like my studio tour. I've got a studio tour video where I do like a dive into just the 101. You can hear like I show you kind of like my favorite things about it and stuff. So yeah, definitely check that out. But yeah, if you're keen a little bit later, I will, if nobody's asking any other questions and I've got through what I want to talk about today, then yeah, we can play a bit with the 101. But I must just warn you that mine actually is in need of going for a service. So like when you turn it on, it takes a few minutes to kind of like heat up and tune up. I kind of show you guys. And this is like the curse of analog gear, you know. Everyone tells you about like how awesome certain analog stuff is, but nobody tells you about when things need a service and how badly out of tune they can go. So I'll leave that for later, show you guys a little bit. It can be quite fun to create random sounds as well anyway. So the idea about this video, I wanted to talk about this vocal sample pack by Xenosonics. So the cool thing about the sample pack is it's kind of designed for electronic music and specifically for Psytrance and stuff like that. And you know, a lot of the time when you find these kind of like vocal sample packs, they're generally either like already heavily processed. So when you load them up into Serum, like I've done like in previous tutorials and stuff, then you often get the like reverbs and stuff and other effects come through. So the cool thing about this sample pack is they've actually given you the dry as well as some affected loops and stuff as well. So I've already kind of gone ahead and thrown a bunch of like the already affected ones and played with them a little bit and stuff. But then what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the like dry samples and look at maybe loading them up into Serum and play around with the samples and stuff. So just as an idea of like what these kind of samples sound like, what I'm going to do is I've actually got a kick and bass and stuff going here. So yeah, let me show you guys just a quick reference, and then we're going to start diving into like each of the samples and checking out, you know, the other stuff that they've got, because there's like various different kind of voices. You know, there's like a wizard voice and a female voice and all sorts of cool stuff. So yeah, stay tuned.
Hallucinations. Hallucinations.
Cool. So as you can hear, like there's these already kind of affected audio samples and stuff, and they've got like various riser kind of things going on. One thing that they have kind of said is that the pack isn't like fully released, so it's kind of like a first public release, and they've got all the dry samples and everything, and they're still gonna add more affected loops and stuff as they go, and everybody who buys the pack obviously gets access to those affected loops and samples at a later stage. So anyway, let's start looking at some of the yeah, it's raining pretty heavily outside, so if the sync is going funky, I see I'm dropping frames. So if the sync is starting to go out of whack, just let me know and I can maybe stop the stream and start it again. But just let me know in the comments. I don't think my sample auditions is going through to the stream, so I'm going to have to load them up one by one to show you guys, but that's okay. So here, as you can see, there's different folders with like different characters, for example. So there's Professor, Ship's Computer, Triptonaut, Wizard, and then all sorts of extra stuff here. And they've actually how can I say, categorized them very well, you know, with the names and everything. So if there's like a particular, how can I say, phrase or something, you can maybe just search, for example, like hallucination or tripping or something, and there it'll come up. So that's pretty cool about these samples. Often with vocal samples and stuff, they're just kind of named with the key and the tempo, and that's it. So I like the fact that the sort of topic is actually, obviously in the name here. It makes sense. So anyway, what I'm going to do is load a couple of these up. So I'm not sure if you can actually hear. I'll leave the mic playing so you can kind of hear through the speakers because it's not coming through. But then I'll load it up into the DAW so you guys can get like an accurate representation of what the high quality sounds sound like.
There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time.
Damn, that's awesome. Okay, so first one is awesome. Let's just throw that in. So what we can do here is we can like chop it up if we want. So yeah, another thing is, as far as I know, when using samples, obviously from movies and stuff like that, certain labels have issues with releasing them, and releasing it onto like SoundCloud and stuff like that can often cause trouble with getting the track blacklisted or whatever for commercial reasons. And that's why it's pretty cool to have these samples that first of all sound good and they've got no background noise, so you can just throw them in and they work. But also, you're not going to get in trouble in terms of the legalities of using the samples. So that's also pretty cool. Just another thing to note here.
There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. In the 6th dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. In the 6th dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities.
So another thing I'm picking up that's actually really cool is it seems like these were recorded to a click track or with a tempo in mind. It looks like they're mostly at about 140 BPM. And the cool thing about this is you don't have to kind of shift the samples so that they sound like sensible on the beat. So that's another huge plus. You can kind of just warp it to the tempo like I've done here. In Cubase, you switch it to musical mode and make sure that the tempo is the sample tempo over here, and it'll warp it to automatically fit your project's tempo, which is 141 at the moment. So it just makes it easier for dragging and dropping these samples, and they kind of automatically shift into place, because I'm pretty sure that they were recorded with a click track, or at least, like I said, with a tempo in mind.
In the 6th dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. In the 6th dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities.
So this one is pretty cool for like a drop kind of section here. If there was like a build-up that we were doing with a riser or something. I've actually got a couple of synths, I think, or just one synth that I've prepped here. The rest of those sounds are coming from the modular, in case anybody is wondering.
capable of generating limitless energy. Capable of generating limitless energy.
Yeah, these are awesome. It's like you just throw it in there and it works. I think it's part due to the fact that there's like no background noise and stuff, but it's also kind of synced to tempos and, thoughtfully named. So I kind of just found the name in that folder, which sounded like it fitted the kind of vibe I wanted to go for, threw it in there and it kind of worked. Hey, what's up, Lacko? I actually want to show you guys a sample pack that Lacko showed me earlier today. That's actually really cool. It's like thousands and thousands of samples of like old school drum machines and stuff. And there's some pretty classic sounds that would, work really well for Goa stuff and techno stuff, which I've been kind of leaning on quite heavily in my last couple of tutorials. So I'm going to post a link to that just now and show you guys some of the sounds and stuff. But yeah, say thank you to him. He's in the comments, Paul Lucian. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce your surname.
Capable of generating limitless energy.
So these are all like these kind of like, I'm sure you guys know exactly, it's like that kind of overused female voice in Psytrance that sounds like a spaceship's computer. And that's what he's called it, ship computer. So that's pretty cool. And it's like all of these kind of...
Downloading. Dimension expansion. Countdown. Connection is connection loss. Element. Energy field detected.
It's, I mean, you may think that's like a little bit cheesy or whatever, but like having that, sometimes you need that little kind of flair.
Flare.
Sometimes you need that little bit of like flair at the end of a bar or something, just to kind of like create that little bit of tension before the, the drop or something like that. And having just, like a little sample or something like in the background can really help to, really take your point home,
Gravity. Helix. Life forms detected.
Okay, so what I want to do is I'm actually going to load some of these into Serum. So I actually made one here. But what we can do is we can just init. Well, the thing is, this is a new sample pack. So I think the idea was they basically kind of like took inspiration from like, hundreds of Psytrance and the subgenres of it, and used that to recreate stuff that's most likely to be used within the genre and stuff. So like before, we would cut stuff from movies and all sorts of stuff like that. But nowadays, with the push for everything to be online and, these automated kind of copyright protection systems and stuff, it becomes a little bit harder. So that's why I think this is really cool. It's like a lot of those classic vocal sounds, but, you can use them without worrying about legal issues. There's no background noise. They already sound good straight off the bat. So really, really cool stuff. So actually, the Serum sound that was playing here is one of those vocal samples. You can actually see it here that I loaded up. If you guys haven't seen my tutorial on Serum vocal processing, you definitely need to check that out. I'm going to do a similar thing here, but let me just remove these effects that are on there, and let's solo this and have a listen. I think the sample pack is £20. it is a one-time purchase, I believe. There's a link in the description, and the cool thing is, he may have actually updated the pack now, but when I got the pack, there was only a couple of a few of those folders of affected sounds. And he said as he creates new ones using the dry effects, he's going to send everyone who's actually purchased the bank the updated kind of updates. Hey guys, everyone who's joining me now. If you don't know what's happening, we're just checking out some vocal sample packs, and what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to load it up into Serum, and we're going to create some synths using the dry samples. So this is the synth, like I've got it now. There's basically a chaos oscillator on the wavetable position, but what I'm going to do is we're going to load up a sample from the ship computer and see what we can do with it. So there'll sometimes be like obviously silence at the end of the samples. I usually go in and cut that out, just so that, you know, when you're using a chaos modulator, you don't want it to go to the point where it's going to be silent. Well, and you may want that. It's a cool like kind of gating effect, but I prefer to have more control in like a plugin or something like that. What am I doing here? Remove selected to end. Yes. Okay, cool. Yo, that sounds sick. They totally need to make a hotkey. If anybody knows if there is one, they need to make a hotkey for deleting multiple of these points in one go. I guess you could just right click. But delete would be the awesome way to go. Steve Duda, if you're listening, probably not, but yeah. Okay, yeah, that was going a bit crazy. So yeah, we could also use a chaos oscillator. That was actually what was loaded, like the sound that I had originally when I was playing, in the track when I started the stream. Then I kind of just wanted to show you guys what it sounds like, sort of linearly, like playing like a regular sample. But yeah, what I want to do here is actually just switch it back to the chaos oscillator. And the settings were BPM sync, mono, SNH, and then on 1/16. What is the difference between FM and FM? Do you mean FM and AM? Because AM would be amplitude modulation, while FM is frequency modulation. If you think of it, what I'm going to do is, let's open up a new instance of Serum here. Sorry, my coffee's getting cold. I need to sip this. I'm getting too into this now. So I'm going to load up two sine waves here, just so it's easiest to visualize. And a basic shapes. So say, for example, we're listening to oscillator A. I've turned B down. And let's set FM from B onto A. So now what's going to happen is the pitch is going to go wee, 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 depending on the shape of oscillator B. Does that make sense? So here's a quick audio example. And so, excuse me, AM would be not the pitch, the actual amplitude wobbling like that. So it's like the difference between a vibrato and a tremolo kind of effect, if that's easier to understand. Yo, if you've got subwoofers right now. Anyway, so yeah, I hope that helps understand. Cubase version. What is the Cubase version?
Lifeforms detected.
10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. In the 6th dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the 6th dimension, you move along a plane of possibilities.
Cool, that's sounding awesome. Well, the rain is coming down now. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments. There's a couple of other things that I want to cover, but obviously can't do it while it's rendering. I want to show you guys a few things. The rhythmic lead, you made just a legato bar and added the automations in Serum and LFO tool with a delay on it. Yeah, so I like to create my rhythmic stuff like that rather than putting in the notes, just because I find you have so much more control over like the curves and like each little bit, rather than having to go in and like play with the velocity and that kind of thing. And also I find it so much more of a hands-on thing, you know. Often with, you know, specifically like psychedelic music, you don't always want things to be like confined within certain notes and certain pitches and certain grids. Sometimes you want to do things that are, you know, a little bit like, you know, different. So that's why I think having, you know, just setting like a blank starting point as one long note and then creating your gate patterns onto that and creating your sequences from that. It's a little bit more of a sort of creative workflow, because you're listening to the thing and you're kind of like, you know, like I would say the analogy is like starting with, you know, like a sculptor starts with like a massive piece of rock and they slowly carving till they get like the perfect sculpture. So it's kind of like that, as opposed to, you know, limiting yourself to, okay, it has to be this note because it's in this octave and all sorts of stuff, and it has to be this grid and all sorts. Also then in terms of like creating like envelopes that change, it's a little bit easier when you can visualize, you know, like for example, let me actually open up, if you guys haven't seen, I actually released my latest Serum preset bank, and it comes with, I think, just over 30 LFO shapes, custom LFO shapes, and those you can load into LFO tool as well. So for example here, you can see it's kind of like choppy notes, but one of them has a kind of an accent, so to speak. But you know, you can do all sorts of things outside of the realm of what basic ADSR envelope can offer you. So this is not the thing I would use all the time, but specifically with these kind of like rhythmic psychedelic patterns, it works amazingly.
There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of hallucinations. In the 6th dimension, you move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of hallucinations. In the 6th dimension, you move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of hallucinations. In hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, move along a plane of possibilities.
Okay, let's see the comments. How's it to anybody who's joining us? Yeah, I think, one of the things about, Psytrance, it's a very kind of immersive genre. You kind of need these, extraterrestrial sounds and all sorts of kind of mental, emotive sounds that are kind of get the brain thinking, ear candy or brain candy or whatever you want to call it. It's one of the things that originally kind of separated early kind of acid house and stuff with, Goa trance is these very, what's the word? Woohoo kind of spacey samples and all sorts of stuff. Psychedelic samples and stuff. Often from like space movies and Carl Sagan stuff. So the cool thing about this is it's not those overused kind of samples that we've heard hundreds of times. I'm sure you guys know those ones, but at the same time, I'm sure there's going to be more samples coming out of this company. I know they've done a serum bank. I haven't got it yet. I've got like the beta version, which I'm not going to show you guys because there's some unfinished macros and whatever in there. But from what I've heard so far, the Serum presets and stuff are really awesome as well. So there's a couple of other things I want to show you guys in this video. So let me just find this sample pack here. So this was actually sent to me. It's an old repost from the Xenosonics forums. It was actually sent to me by Laco in the comments. So it's basically like almost every kind of old school classic drum machine you could ever imagine sampled. They've even got like Roland SH-101 that are creating drum samples here. So some of them, I mean, for example, are like a bit noisy and piercing, but there's some pretty classics. Like, I mean, that would be an amazing Goa kick. Needs a bit of a edit here, as you can see. Oh, is it Lushko? Luchko. Sorry. But yeah, they've also got like the classic CR78, CR68 CompuRhythm stuff. This is like classic techno sounds. And this sample bank is free. Let me see if I can find the link and post it here. So there's the link in case anybody wants to go and grab it. It's in the chat comments. So yeah, I'm not going to kind of dive too deep here and use these in this track because I don't really need too much kind of percussion elements and stuff. And it seems like that's the kind of focus here. Ooh, some Lord Rack stuff. Pretty cool lasery kind of sample. But yes, there's literally so much stuff. Yeah, I don't even know where to start. So yeah, definitely check that out. Lindrum. This is some classic stuff here. I mean, I wouldn't use it in a track, but you know, having the resource in case you want to do like some synth pop or something. I mean, Lindrum was the drum kit for like that old school synth pop kind of stuff. But where is it now? Where is it now? The TR909. There we go. So this is broken up into kits and various other stuff. Like a ton of different stuff. So yeah, definitely check that out. This clap might actually work here. Old school 909 clap. Why not? But yeah, there's something else I wanted to show you guys as well. But let me just play the track and have a few sips of my coffee before it gets cold here.
There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. Hallucinations. In the 6th dimension, move along a plane of possibility. and one lucid hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities.
So, the kind of last thing that I had planned to show you guys in this live stream, I wouldn't call it an episode, in this live stream, unless there's like other comments and stuff, is, so I'm sure most of you guys know a company called DiscoDSP. They made a classic plugin called Discovery, which was basically like a, I would say, remake of the Nord Lead 2 in a plugin. And it was kind of the plugin back in the day when we didn't have like Massive and Serum and these. I think it was even available before Albino 3, when FM synthesis was still very much in its like early days in terms of plugins and stuff. Or at least the plugins that did FM back then didn't really sound very good. But now the issue with DiscoDSP is obviously sales are low, so they've kind of announced that they're moving over to a yearly subscription system, and their customers who owned versions back in the day will have to pay yearly to have access to download an update. So what this means, as far as I understand it, I might be wrong, so if there's somebody at DiscoDSP, they might want to correct it in the comments or something. But as far as I understand it, this means if you bought a license and you lose your install, you're going to have to pay yearly to get access to that install file, which is a bad thing. I mean, this is obviously, okay, this is my opinion. I think it's bad for developers to do that because I feel software is license-based. I don't buy a product as much as I'm buying a license to use that product. And I feel when you're buying a license, you should be under the understanding of, what that license entails for its entirety. And if things change, they should give you the option to either, maybe pay a small amount for a never-ending license or something like that. But anyway, I could tell you guys my opinions all day long. The good news, though, is that some legend has posted all of the wave tables and waveforms from almost the entire DiscoDSP catalog onto the X for Serum forums. So if you're a registered user, you can sign up for an account on the forum, and you can download all of the nice waveforms from DiscoDSP to use inside Serum. So, I mean, there's some really awesome stuff here. One thing to note, though, is most of them aren't really, how can I say, they're not already turned into Serum wavetables, if that makes sense. So I've actually done the wrong thing and dropped them into the actual, I've dropped them into the folder as opposed to importing them one by one. But, I mean, as you can see, there's some pretty interesting stuff here to choose from. So actually what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the folder that I've got and drag them in as opposed to using that folder. Oh, what have I done? All my windows are minimized. I don't know what's happening. Okay, where was I? So yeah, I'm going to drag them in so we can play with some of these. Yeah, so as far as I know, like if you own a copy, if I were you, I would back it up onto some sort of cloud-based system. If you've already got the install, because as far as I know, if you lose that install, you're going to have to pay for the like yearly subscription update plan to be able to re-download your install file. which is kind of weird. So what am I doing? Okay, yeah, serum. So let's drop this one in here. So I haven't actually tried this yet, so it might be any one of these, but let's just try dynamic. No, sorry. Pitch average is the one I usually use for waveforms in which the pitch is the same all the way through. And it's done nothing. What's happening here now? Oh, there we go. Oops, there was no audio there. Thanks, Luchko. So, what was I saying? We want to go into this actual wavetable editor and remove all of the silent ones, and create maybe normalize each of them to give each one volume, and then create like a morph table between them, something like crossfade or spectral. See which one suits best. So there we've quickly created a new waveform out of, or a new wavetable out of the out of that folder that's available in the Serum thingamy, in the Serum user forum. So definitely check that out. If you do maybe lose your DiscoDSP plugin, or if you liked some of the sounds in there but you want more advanced features like what Serum offers, then definitely check that out. They've got like the factory stuff in here, as well as some of the other like stuff that was added later on. But yeah, I wouldn't drag the folder in like as you see here, like what I've done. I would actually just drag each of these like from your actual folder here, drag them into the Serum window. Let's just find like the analog saw was quite a nice one, if I remember correctly. One, two. Okay, there's mic coming through. Good. Still got it, guys. How's that FM sound, hey? That is awesome. So that was one of the things, like I said, DiscoDSP Discovery's FM sounded incredible. And I think it was due in part to the fact that the saw that was kind of in there, one of the saws that was modeled in that, like as you can see in this waveform, it doesn't really look like a saw waveform. It kind of does sound like it though, and that's kind of the uniqueness about it. But I think that's what creates that weird texture. It's kind of more grindy than when you use like Serum's init saw, for example. So yeah, that sounds awesome. Especially like when you put a bandpass filter on here. It's the one.
Of time. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions.
Thalamus, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Yeah, I think that's the exact file that I posted. And yes, indeed. I think it's one thing that made a lot of those classic synths unique is the weird shapes in the waveforms. And I might be incorrect in saying it, but I think it's due in part to the different components that the different synths used. So like different capacitors and all sorts of stuff like that have different like discharge rates, and that changes like the slopes and all sorts of stuff. So that's why, for example, I mean, if you've got an analog synth and you take out one of the capacitors and change it for another one, it's obviously going to sound completely different. But anyway, yeah. But like also, I've actually bounced this out so I can show you in here. If you check, for example, this is the saw wave. I sampled this out of my Roland SH101. And you see it's got this curve. So it's not like a perfect saw, for example. And there's different harmonics to, like when you init the saw. Each of the fundamentals has like kind of different phase. Each of the harmonics has like a different phase, and it's kind of staggered like this. It's super interesting. I really enjoy looking at this stuff. I still don't quite like fully understand everything about it, but Hell, what have I done? I've just destroyed the SH101's waveform. Okay, so like you can see, it's got this curve, and that's obviously due to the fact that, like, you know, in nature, everything suffers from like inertia, I think is the word. So like, you know, these electronic components can't go from 1 to -1 instantly. There's like that discharge rate, or like the electrons themselves have to move at a certain rate. I might be completely wrong. I don't really understand electronics on that level, but I believe that's why these kind of, you know, when you look at like waveforms from the old classic synths and stuff, there's often these kind of little inaccuracies, especially the analog stuff, where they look slightly different to something like a perfect saw wave in a plugin or something like that. They probably sound very similar, and like in a track you probably won't hear the difference, but like I said, I'm just really interested in checking this kind of stuff out. This is the sub. You know, it's supposed to be a square, I believe, but this one actually sounds quite different to a square. It sounds like a square sine kind of mix. Check this out. There was a bend on there, but yeah, you can see it's got the roundiness to it. Oh, wrong. So like when you hear it, you think, okay, yes, that's a square, but now when you compare it to the basic shape square, it actually sounds quite different. Pretty interesting, hey? Anyway, so yeah, let me play this a few loops, and I'm gonna go get another refill. I also need the toilet, so be right back.
Full of a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the 6th dimension, full of a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the 6th dimension, full of a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of hallucinations. In the 6th dimension, full of a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9.
Oh wait, where's my face? So yeah, it says Savage Regime says the negative polarity also looks like it peaks while the positive one doesn't. That's probably due in part to my slightly noob sampling techniques. I believe that's a thing called DC offset. But like I said, it still sounds like the waveform that's actually coming out of the synth itself. But anyway, I mean, let me know if you guys have any questions or anything. I'm just going to make some sounds and make some noise for a little bit. How long I've been streaming? Jeez, over an hour. Wow. Okay, so I'm gonna make a little build-up kind of thing here and use some of these vocal samples. Yeah, just give me a shout if there's any questions. I'm actually gonna mute these hardware synth input channels just to make things easier to focus on here.
In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Hallucinations. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities.
Savage Regime asked question about vocal samples and licenses. How do artists go about clearing copyright samples, quotes from movies and such? Is there such streamlined process for it? No, there isn't, and often they don't get the clearing and stuff like that. I think specifically with Psytrance, because it's not such a big kind of thing commercially. However, like I was explaining earlier, the problem is nowadays with these kind of, with the push to everything going kind of streaming and online and digital, there's a lot of automatic copyright claiming services that can kind of tell when stuff is cut from certain places. And I don't think it's actually listening to the audio. It might. I don't understand the algorithms behind it. But I think it's got to do with certain like digital codes that are kind of like written into the actual files themselves. And I think these like systems can pick that kind of stuff up. I might be wrong. I might be completely not understanding it. But I've heard of situations where people upload stuff that has certain samples from movies and stuff onto SoundCloud, and then it gets claimed and stuff like that. And so the cool thing is, like, these samples that I'm using here are you're allowed to use them. Like, if you buy the license, then you can, I mean, if you buy the pack, then you're obviously allowed to use it whenever you want. And there's cool things, you know. One of the reasons that that's so cool is because it's 100% legal, and you don't ever have to worry about a track that you've maybe worked for months and months on, and you've uploaded it, and then it gets claimed, you know. So let me just explain something for those who might not understand how like a copyright claiming system works in a streaming platform. So this doesn't apply to me because I don't really monetize my videos, but in terms of like SoundCloud and that kind of stuff. So say for example, this is purely theoretical, like I said, because I don't monetize my videos. It's all due to like donations from like the support from you guys and stuff. But say for example, I've uploaded a track and I monetize it, and it's got a sample that belongs to another company. What happens is they claim it, and the monetizing no longer goes to my Google AdSense account. It now goes directly to the company who owns the contents account. So if your sort of if your goal is to make make money from streaming your music, then it's not really a good idea to use samples that haven't been cleared, because the chances are it's going to get to a point where, if you start making money from it, it's going to become it's going to be noticed, and it probably is going to be claimed and stuff. And so, it's probably, I'm not sure how many of you guys have seen it, but it was a thing a little while ago, a few months ago on YouTube, where a lot of the YouTube creators were complaining about their content being claimed by companies and stuff like that. But a lot of the time it was partly due to the fact that they were using clips in videos and stuff that belonged to those companies. And a lot of the time I think it's just because, these guys don't understand the sort of the layers behind like the licensing system and stuff, and it can be really confusing. Even if if there's a thing called fair use. So say for example, like in my Asterix video, I showed this Asterix clip from the Asterix track. So that's what they call fair use. I'm explaining certain things about it, and I'm engaging with people about the content, but I'm not using it to monetize myself. I don't put ads on the video. The video is not monetized. It's not like sponsored. So it's, for me, if like Asterix, he probably won't, because he's a cool guy, as I've heard. But if, say for example, he claims my video, he would be able to get the monetization from that video, but the video is not monetized, so it doesn't affect me, if you know what I mean. If I used his track and I used his samples or whatever, and I monetized the video, to me personally, I don't think that's fair use, because you're using it in a commercial sense. But anyway, I'm blabbering way beyond the point now. So I don't even remember what the point was. Yeah, the cool thing is that these samples are free to use. You're not going to get any issues with streaming and stuff like that. So, if you do plan on creating a track and monetizing it in any way, using samples that are cleared or using samples that you own is definitely a good idea. I'm currently working on Cubase 10. Unfortunately, they just finished. They were doing like 50% off specials on their entire line for the whole of last month, I believe. So I should have actually said something on some of my streams and stuff, but I didn't really notice it because I had actually upgraded a little bit before. So unfortunately, I didn't get the 50% discount. But yeah, a lot of other people I know were upgrading last month because of those discounts. Anyway, I think I answered your question, but Savage Regime, but I did blabber for ages. So let me know if I didn't answer the question. I kind of lost my train of thought there. I'm going to carry on working on this build-up thing.
In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time.
Oh, they've completely changed the offline process menu in Cubase 10. What is even going on here? Extend process range. Yes, okay, that's where it is. And that looks all about right. Let me maybe do that. So for those who don't know what I'm doing here, this is offline processing. It's a ability to be able to like apply. I think you've got it in Logic and Studio One and in Cubase as well, obviously. You can kind of apply effects directly onto samples. You don't have to put them onto the channel and then bounce them out again, which is pretty cool, specifically if you want to do these kind of like reversey things. I'll show you now.
There are 10 dimensions. 10 dimensions. 10 dimensions. Move along a plane of possibilities. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities.
Hey, what's up, Uncle Bat? How's it going if you've just joined us? Yeah, it's a long stream. I don't know how much longer I'm going to go. I'm just making noise at this point. Let's just put like an arpeggiator kind of thing in here. Let's do it up-down. I actually want to show you guys something that I noticed recently is I think it's these multi-filters. Like, say for example, let's do low and band pass. So the filter, I mean the pan of these filters, I believe, swaps them. So this is pretty cool. It might not be with this one, but it's something that I was playing with the other day, and I was like, what's going on here? And I couldn't figure it out. And then I was like, okay, this is cool. This is cool. Let me just try see if I can emulate that quickly for you guys. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but you get this kind of weird binaural stereo effect. So it's something that I've started playing with quite a lot recently. Instead of just using like a simple low pass or band pass, I'm not sure if I was getting it correctly because my headphones aren't on and I'm not like sitting exactly correctly because I'm trying to get the perfect sound, visuals, everything is a bit crazy here. But it's something I've started experimenting with, and then maybe putting like a LFO on the pan, and they're not going all the way. Let's just Alt-Shift to make it bipolar, and then do something like that. So you get this kind of like weird stereo effect where it's like a different kind of signal in both, and that kind of helps to widen the sound. So that's pretty cool. So that's just a little cool trick to kind of get sort of maximum wideness impact out of something like an incredibly simple source, like just a square wave or something like that. So yeah, when coupled with ping pong delay, obviously my favorite, and some reverb, the effect is incredible. So furthermore, what I like to do is create like a gated pattern here. So let's say, for example, we've got this like arpeggiator going here and it's creating these notes, but it's hitting, like every note is creating a gate. So what I like to do is create like a LFO here and then create my own gate pattern. So it won't hit on all the notes. But the idea here is to experiment with like different times and even different grid sizes. So let's, for example, do like a 6. Check this out. Cool, that's sounding fantastic. So then for maximum impact, let's put a chaos oscillator onto the octave. So now what's going to happen is I'm obviously going to change these to something like 1/4 or maybe even 1/2. We'll listen and change it. So what's going to happen is every time the gate opens, it's going to kind of hit, excuse me, winter is coming, folks. It's going to hit like a different octave, but it's still going to be like harmonically correct because the notes that it's triggering are the same. They're just going to be like in a different octave. So check this out. So that's like instant twinkly starry type stuff, and you can easily just go mix all the way up on the reverb, and you get this kind of like pad type of sound. And the pad is made up of that like chord, because obviously it's kind of like reverbing each of those notes, and it's kind of creating the chord of like whatever notes you've got there. So say for example you want to change like the chord of whatever this kind of pad is doing, then you just change some of the notes in the actual arpeggiator. So I'm going to show you what I mean here. you know, it'd be really sick is to kind of have this fading in, and then at this drop, that reverb to kind of come off completely and it turn into those little twinkly things. So here, like these, if you want less of like a crazy twinkly kind of thing, instead of using the chaos to modulate the octave, Serum's also got a cool thing called note on random. So every time the note is hit, it generates a random modulation amount. So this is cool if you've got these kind of like 16 arpeggiator patterns and you want it to kind of change every time. So check this out. Yeah, it's actually really cool as well to just like introduce little bits of it, not the full ARP pattern. That's how also I like to create like different kind of progressions out of the same kind of material, and that can kind of help to create like a sort of always moving sort of rhythmic pattern as opposed to like still being the same kind of like notes and stuff like that. Change it up a bit. Hey, Eminona Fractal Circus. Sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hello.
You could move along a plane of possibilities.
I kind of actually prefer the more random octavey thing instead. So let's put that back onto, I think it was Chaos 1. Yeah, let's try this now, see how this goes. Hey, Franz. Thanks for joining us.
Could move along a plane of possibilities. In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time.
Cool, I gotta go get another refill. I've been streaming for an hour and 45 minutes, so I think I'm gonna do another like 15 minutes or so. I'm gonna hit 2 hours and call it a day. So let me know if you guys have any more comments or questions or anything, and I'll try to address those. But in the meantime, let me go get a refill and go to the bathroom and etc. etc.
In the sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time. Sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time.
I just remembered somebody in the chat earlier asked me to give the SH101 some love because they wanted to get one, and I'm sorry if you're still watching, waiting for that. Let me maybe do something like that quickly. So what I'll do here is let me just loop a kick and bass. So bear in mind, the synth is very old, so it does take some tuning to get started. So let's do that quickly. I'm gonna just play kick and bass and percussion while maybe make like an ARP or something on it. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I'll need to actually turn that channel on. Ha! Instant dub delay. How cool is that? Okay, so I think I've got a tuner loaded here, because like every time you turn this thing on, you've got to retune it. And so are the joys of owning old analog equipment, like I said earlier. But now this one actually needs a service. Check this out. If you like touch the panel here by the power button while you're holding down a note, the pitch goes all wonky. Check this out. It's actually a pretty cool like random LFO effect. Pretty crazy, eh? But yeah, it makes the tuning of the thing a little bit difficult. But yeah, for those with sensitive ears, maybe I should actually just turn this down a little bit. I'm going to tune this up quickly. So it's I think it's like part fault in the design and just part it being old, but like the issue, like where the issue is like the power button. It's obviously I actually know I've serviced it before myself, and I've serviced a friend of mine's. The power button gets dirty, and that's like it like somehow cuts the voltage out little bits at a time. But now the problem is that the tuning knob is right above the power button, so you touch the tuning knob and it like triggers that little fault. So you got to like tune it and then carry on holding it, and then it kind of gets there over time. But I think I pretty much got it. Let's see. Okay, close enough. So cool thing about this is it's got this. Oh shit, the autofocus is on. Sorry. It's got this transpose, so I can, you know, just transpose it to the key I'm working in here, which I think is A, and then do like my regular. Okay, cool. So let's get the clock going, and I'm gonna put in an ARP. Dude, tuning is terrible on any piece of analog equipment. I'm telling you now. It's not about like the brands and stuff. It's just something you kind of deal with, and each one you like most of them will have like calibration stuff in there. I just realized you can't see my face, but anyway, you can hear what I'm talking about. But anyway, so back to the SH101. Okay, so because there's like delay with the timing, what I do is I usually send most of my stuff through this guy, and I'll just delay like the actual DAW channels. Oh, sherbet. This guy, and I'll delay like the DAW channels, and then leave the synth channels not delayed, so that the clock kind of is in line, if that makes sense. Anyway, that should work now. Sure, that's what you call getting carried away. Sorry, guys. If I touch this stuff, it just takes me to another world. Yeah, well, I think it's also some tuning knobs. Back to what I was saying about all analog stuff being difficult to tune. The tuning knobs generally obviously have like different ranges and stuff like that, and each like device will have like, specifically with MIDI, will have a chip to clock at different rates. So it only really becomes apparent like with stuff that doesn't have MIDI and you've got like CV to deal with, all sorts of stuff like that, and different devices have different one is like -5 to +5 and all sorts of stuff like that. Do I have a link to my rack on Modular Grid? I don't believe I've got one to this current one. Some of the modules actually don't belong to me. I'm borrowing them from a friend. He's overseas at the moment, so he's kind of letting me use them. So not 100% updated, but I've got a couple. But what I'll do is I'm actually planning to do a video explaining like my thought process behind the layout and stuff of the modules, how I use it to create live jams and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, stay tuned for that. What I'll maybe do is just update it and then maybe just post a comment like on the video when it's done. Just post a comment and then I'll reply to it with a link to the Modular Grid thing. I'll quickly put it together tonight just so you can see like what exactly was making those particular sounds today, I guess. Uncle Butts is 30 and no signs of balding. I'm happy for you, bro. I'm going grey though. That's worse. No, I'm joking. Yeah, the secret is to eat your veggies. It is. It's true. Let's see. Yeah, I did do a video where I did go through the modular setup. However, at that point, there wasn't a thing in there called Basimilus Iteritus Altus. And that's what's doing this sound. It's like my new favorite thing of all time. Let me show you quick what sound it's creating. It's basically, I'm not sure if I understand it 100%. It's like a 6-voice additive synthesizer, like a full voice synthesizer in like a tiny little box. Let me go back to this view actually. It's this little guy here, basically. That's like the one I'm borrowing. So check this out. It's an absolutely mental thing. It's like drums, synths, like it's like an entire music machine, literally inside that tiny little thing. It's crazy. It's obviously got like one audio source that it can play at a time, but like just using the different modulations, you can switch between like kick drum, hi-hat, snare, and bass kind of in the middle. It's absolutely mind-blowing. I like can't even... I'm still trying to understand it. I've had it for a couple of weeks. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So what I do is like I'll usually just send like, I think this is the MIDI that was going through to it, just a 16th pattern. And then there was random modulations coming from like the Wogglebug and Marbles. And the modulation was basically switching it between like whether there was a bit of white noise mixed in, whether there was a bit of bass line mixed in, whether there was a bit of like that percussion-y pluck kind of, I don't know. Like I said, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. But so yeah, what I'll do is like just post a comment on the video saying like what's do you have a modular grid setup? And then what I'll do is I'll quickly put it together of this exact layout, so you can reference the video just in case you want to check like what sounds are doing what and stuff. Let's see what other questions do I have here. Yeah, the hot glue is amazing. It's I actually don't own it either. It's the same guy. I borrowed it from him because he's overseas. But yeah, it's flipping amazing thing. I'll actually, for any local South Africans, what I'll do is I'll post a link to where I've bought all my stuff, the store that does it here locally. Anyway, nothing wrong with going grey. You're right, it just makes me look like more of a wizard. Cool. I think that... Oh wait, here's a question. Have you heard of U-Tune by TubeTech? I have not. Darth Vapor. Is that a module? Is it a plugin? Let's do another 5 minutes or so and I'll answer some questions. Let me know, is it a module or a plugin? And I'll maybe check it out. Apply lots of facial sunscreen and don't smoke too much and you don't look old with grey hair. Bro, I'm in South Africa. It's like sun is shining and everyone's smoking. Just kidding.
sixth dimension, you could move along a plane of possibilities. There are 10 dimensions, 9 of space, and 1 of time.
France, what I'll do is I'll send you that preset, but I'll also load it onto my Patreon. This like random arpeggiator that's making that kind of reverb kind of vibe. I'll upload that to my Patreon for all you guys to check. And I'll send it to you, France, as well. During live sets, for how many bars do you allow yourself to keep the same kick and bass rolling? I mean, before people get bored, always fear that while playing in front of people. I just mumbled that. I'm not sure if you guys heard that. So Thalamus has a question here. During live sets, for how many bars time do you allow yourself to keep the same kick and bass rolling? I mean, before people get bored, always feel that while playing in front of people. It's a difficult one. I'm kind of still getting into the kind of 100% full live kind of situation. A lot of the time, I mean, up till now, most of my live sets have been like based in Tractor. I've actually done like a video on that where I'll have like the completed track, and then I'll have Tractor sending out MIDI clock, and then I'll plug a synth in and then do stuff over an already completed track. And so I think it's also due to the fact that oh, here's this plugin. Let me check. What is this? Utune. What is this? I think it's due to the fact that I kind of also, I get kind of worried about whether it'll, work, but whether tracks will work, being full live and stuff, and how the mix will sound. But I've kind of been getting more into Bitwig and experimenting a lot, and I find that that's actually very, very powerful, and it actually sounds very good in terms of like being able to prepare already made stems and stuff and still mix them. But the problem is, I find like a lot of the time when, oh man, this looks good. A lot of the time when playing gigs, you don't have very good monitoring. So I like to make sure that my track is like already mixed, and especially for situations like that. So I think, when I start playing full 100% live sets in Bitwig with the modular and everything, I'm still going to have a flash drive with the tracks like bounced down, just in case there's a situation I get to where the monitoring is absolutely terrible and I won't even be able to hear what's happening on the mix anyway. Yeah, I'll check out that Utune or Microtune module a little bit more in detail. I've kind of been looking at different quantize stuff, and the way I've kind of like set out my idea is that like the way I'm kind of like laying out my Eurorack at the moment is I'm trying not to generate too much notes inside at the moment. I mean, obviously I have the ability to generate like ARPs and stuff with marbles and more chaotic stuff with Wogglebug, but I can just quickly patch those in. But like the leads and stuff, I'm trying to leave like the notes in MIDI, but then I'm changing the patterns using different sequences in the actual rack itself. So let me actually switch over here quickly. I've got the Mutant Brain, and that's taking MIDI from my computer. And that's, you can see I've got like these 3 channels, and that's like the different notes for each voice. So for example, like I can have 3 different MIDI channels loaded and then be able to like trigger those, and then the notes are always going to be able, like between the 3 voices, the notes are always going to work. So the cool thing about that is I can do stuff like chords, but thoughtfully. So I can think like, okay, what notes work well with this arrangement, and then only put those notes into the MIDI, and then play with the triggers and play with like the patterns using Euclidean circles and using the actual T side of marbles. So that's like my idea, is I'm trying to stay away from too much tuning inside the rack, and I'm basically sending it multiple MIDI channels and doing live sequencing in terms of the triggers and the patterns and stuff. But yeah, anyway, I find that's easier to be able to create more like compelling arrangements in the analog world. A lot of the time, when you have all these different voices and you're sequencing them in the box, you can get like crazy stuff going on, especially when you have like notes that don't work with each other, like clashing and all sorts of stuff. But anyway, I think I've blabbered on enough this afternoon, and it's getting pretty late. I've got some things to do, got some cooking to do. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Time for OT. What is OT? Cool. Yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. If you got any further questions and stuff, let me know in the comments. Fractal Circus, maybe just remind me in a comment so I get the notification, and I'll quickly make the modular grid link for you. Shot, guys. Yeah, see you guys soon. I'm going to try do a weekly stream. I'm not going to promise anything yet, but I'm kind of setting myself up to do like a weekly stream thing, kind of getting my schedule in order. I'm terrible with schedules, but I'm trying. So I'm not going to promise anything for next week, but let's just say like I'm going to try for Wednesday streams. So I'm going to try and make that a thing. Anyway, see you guys soon.